Well, I thought that last week was going to be wild, but this week it's reached whole new levels. Please be aware that due to the software we're using, we've been having some slight audio sync issues in our last few shows. We were trying to get that sorted before the show. Hopefully, it doesn't kick in this time, but you never know. Unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do about it because it's just the software we're using. Good evening and welcome to Normal Island. Please moor your ships in the allotted areas and remember that the water may well not be safe to drink because we've got people like Thames Water about. This evening we'll be looking at Elon Musk's tantrum over being defied by judges, Piers Morgan defending Israel, a working class grave being uncovered at a workhouse, and Labour's strategy to deal with reform by copying everything that they're doing. And returning to the show as a guest, we have Harry, aka Champagne Socialist. I've missed being able to chat about the Labour Party and what an excellent job they're doing with you, Harry. How
I
are
know.
you
I
feeling
mean,
in
we're
yourself?
spoiled for choice at the moment, aren't we? So, I'm not sure what we're going to talk about. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been quite a week to be honest. It's been
Quite a week. It's only Monday.
yeah. I know. God, it's only going to get worse, I think. Right, let's get into it. So don't forget to like and share the live. It helps us out massively and allows us to keep the show going. As usual, Harry and I will be reading through your comments, and we'll be joined by our producer when we read out the comments. So do keep commenting your thoughts as we go through the stories. All right, on to our first story of the night. We must all constantly be on the lookout for the warning signs of fascism these days. This means not only looking out for the subtle hints that we can derive from Elon Musk's body language, say, but also looking for attacks on the judiciary, equality before the law. Um, bureaucrat, Equality before the law is bureaucratic and procedural. Excuse me, the opposite of everything the fascist wants. So attacks on the judiciary are common from fascist adjacent people. The fascist wants a world in which the law is selectively applied to minorities for perceived slights, but never applied to them or the people who look like them. Therefore, an independent judiciary, you can see, stands in the way. In the USA, judges moving to block Trump's plans are finding themselves under fire. District Judge Paul A. Engelmayer blocked Elon Musk's forced access to Treasury records, I should say, and ordered him to destroy any copies of the records that he possesses. Never one to show his hand, Elon Musk immediately started tweeting his emotions out. For defying him, Elon Musk said that Engelmayer was an activist posing as a judge, calling for him to be impeached, and said he was a corrupt judge protecting corruption, which is very, very tautological. And then the alleged vice president, J.D. Vance. Of course, we all know that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are the president and vice president. Um, Donald Trump and Elon Musk are the president and vice president, not J.D. Vance. That was my point. Uh, and the alleged vice president, J.D. Vance, rolled over on his couch to tweet out this. If a judge tried to tell a general how to conduct a military operation, that would be illegal. If a judge tried to command the attorney general there's a spelling error there, excuse me. If a judge tried to command the attorney general to use her discretion, how to use her discretion as a prosecutor, that's also illegal. Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. Now, perhaps he's forgotten that Elon Musk isn't the executive branch of the US government, and the whole point of the judiciary is to balance the power of government so that a dictator cannot rise. American freedom only means something if you're actually avoiding slipping back into a monarchy. But J.D. Vance is a lifeless NPC, so let's be real, you can't expect him to have a good take on anything. But I think my favourite bootlicking tweet that Elon Musk retweeted was this one. It says, I trust Elon Musk and Doge with my personal information over lifelong government bureaucrats because, unlike the government bureaucrats, and that's where the first sentence ends. Elon Musk report, and then it goes on. Elon Musk reports directly to the President of the United States of America. Who the heck do these unelected bureaucrats report to? It's so sweet when Americans try to do critical thinking. They're so nearly there. They just haven't quite mastered the bit where answering unelected bureaucrats with more unelected bureaucrats might be a bad idea. You know, if you want less unelected bureaucrats, start electing people to do those jobs. Have specific elected positions for those jobs. Don't throw in more unelected bureaucrats from the corporate sector, especially when the new bureaucrats are divorced, insecure billionaires with vested interests in cutting the government so it can't hold them accountable, and whose incompetence recently collapsed a social media network. It's like when my granddad deleted the App Store and all of the system apps on his phone because he never uses them. It took ages to fix, and we didn't even have to get a court order to do it. It's exactly the same thing with Elon Musk going in and just deleting things. The reality of the situation is that people who say they want to cut government waste and have a smaller government actually just want corporate power to rule us like kings without any democratic oversight, as this comic strip from Private Eye illustrated so perfectly. But apart from that, it's a great plan. What do you make of these attacks on the judiciary in America, Harry?
I mean, same shit, different day. You know what I mean? It's not really a surprise at all. We kind of knew this was going to be the angle that Musk and co were going to go for. Obviously, Doge, Department of Government Efficiency, a meme that I'm sure would have been funny back in 2018 when it was relevant. But now it's just rehashed, and it's just like, let it go, man. Let it go. But this is what happens when you're a loser, but you also happen to be the most richest man in the world. That it's inevitable that you, when you're so desperate to be liked, that you sort of go down this sort of route. No, I'm not surprised that he's doing this. I mean, I would have thought someone like Musk, who's had plenty of experiences with the courts, both in terms of divorces, settling. Sexual misconduct cases as well, that he would kind of know how the courts would work, but clearly not.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like he's disconnected from that from that world in certain ways. Despite, as you say, having been through the courts so many times, you'd have thought he'd have figured it out. But it was amazing going through his Twitter feed. Sorry, X feed,
You evolving
and
down south?
yeah, yeah. I'll use its self-identified gender. I'll use its self-identified gender. But yeah, it's yeah, X. And seeing Elon Musk just reposting like anyone who would agree with him, like anyone who was defending him, like by name, and it really was quite interesting to see all of these like conservative figures who I recognize from TikTok. Um, and there was that Savannah lady. Harry may be familiar with them, a Republican lady named Savannah, and her eyes like looked like she looked like she'd taken something. I'm gonna
Right.
be honest. She looked like she'd taken something. She was like this the whole time during the
Right.
video. It was like, oh my god. And it's like, those are the people you're getting out to defend you, and you want to like have control of the Department of Education and like go through government departments like just deleting files and bits of
Yeah.
code. Really?
Well, this is the thing with all of them. I mean, it's just kind of like, these are, stupid people's ideas of what smart people are like. And Elon Musk is a prime example of that. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, obviously, I think we kind of know what the end goal is here. Limit government oversight, allow him to get away with all sorts. This is a man who owes quite a bit of his wealth to government contracts and sort of taxpayer money, essentially. And yet here he is trying to cut the power of the state. So yeah, who knows how it's going to play out.
Yeah, I'm actually really interested in this dual relationship that conservatives play in both making government spending really wasteful and so it doesn't serve the interests of the people, and then also pointing at the government and going, we need to cut the government back more because it's wasteful and doesn't serve the interests of the people. Do you know what I mean? It's like a
Yeah,
self-fulfilling prophecy.
yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you could look at that like austerity here in this country. Basically limit funding to public to local authorities, but expect them to provide the same standard of service. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the culture war stuff, where there's a whole thing about like the Western civilization is going to meet its clash with the East, or with whether that's a clash with China or a clash with the Muslim countries of the world. And we're going for this clash of civilizations, as like Samuel Huntington, I think it was, put it. And there's like by framing it that way, you're both setting it up so that it is a clash, and also you're perpetuating all of those things, and at the same time saying it's an inevitability. And I feel like it's the same thing with like government spending. It's like,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
yeah, 100%. I mean, it always helps to have an enemy. If there's a visible sort of enemy that you can identify, then, and if that is the main thing that revolves around your politics, then sure, that's going to be an effective tool. I mean, kind of like with Musk and sort of DEI and stuff like that. Though it is
mm,
quite interesting how many plane crashes have happened since DEI got cancelled in America.
yeah,
So no, maybe there's a link, maybe there's not. All we know
yeah.
is that DEI is not the cause of those plane crashes.
Yes. I really liked Jasmine Crockett, the Congress. I think she's Congress. I don't think she's. I think she's a member of the House. I don't think she's a member of the Senate. Um, Coming out and saying that the people complaining about DEI are just like mediocre white men who really like it's always mediocre white men complaining about DEI. And the reality is, like, all of the advantage still goes to the white men, rich white men in America. Like, that's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, for me, myself as a teacher, for me, DEI is just trying to make everyone included. And so when I see a lot of the discourse around it, I just think, just go away. Like, I don't think you actually know what you're talking about. It's like when people talk about critical race theory, that they've never read it in their lives, but they've heard something about it, and that's what they're running with. Um, but
mm.
yeah, no, it's a shame because some of it's actually quite a good read. It is hard to read, but it's quite enjoyable.
Yeah. It's just the latest thing that the conservatives have been told to
Yeah.
be mad about.
Well, yeah, it's like that meme, the one where it's like, how it's been flipped on, that I support the current thing meme. It's kind of been flipped on its head, like, I support I hate the current thing.
Yeah,
And DEI is just it's just the next thing. I don't know what's going to be next. I don't know. Maybe trans people
that's
will
good.
have another.
You and I think in memes, because I was thinking about the other meme where he's like replacing the computer chip with
Yeah,
the
that's kind
like
of what I think. That's
next
kind of a
thing to be
similar
mad
one,
about
isn't it?
is
Yeah,
DEI, rather than you take out the CRT one, put in the
yeah.
DEI one, and the conservative is mad at the DEI. Like, it's, oh my god, it's so dumb. Like, it's so
Uh,
stupid. But yes, I am concerned. I think the Onion put it very well, actually. The Onion said something along the lines of like, Trump moves to exploit critical loophole in law, that uh, in the "Who's going to stop me" clause or something along those lines, and it's like,
Yeah, well, I mean, this is
that is
the
the
this is the
problem.
thing with Trump. Ever since sort of 2015, the whole thing has been like, oh, he's not going to be able to get his way out of this one, and then proceeds to do it. It's like when you tell a child, "Don't do that," you're going to get hurt. They
Mm-hmm.
do it, and they don't get hurt, so they think, "I'll do it again." And this is the thing. There's no real threat to him that we can see or that we can clearly identify, because no one's stopping him. There's no the whole idea of checks and balances is completely gone. I've got a textbook here in this room somewhere that I teach to my A level students, and the whole thing is that there are supposed to be these checks and balances that stop these massive overreaches of power. Yeah, it's very clear that it's not working the way that it should be. But then you could argue that perhaps it never was supposed to work that way. It was all just based on people having a sense of right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're a legally recognized rapist like Donald Trump, then you clearly don't have that.
Yeah, it's the good chap theory of politics, isn't
Yeah.
it? We call it in the UK.
Simon Golper has a really good book about that, The Good Chaps, which I read
Mm.
on holiday last year, which I thought was really good.
Ah, nice, nice. Yeah, I think it's a model which is rapidly failing us, and like I just think in a sane country, for one, Donald Trump wouldn't have been allowed to run after he attempted an insurrection against the government. Like, obviously, don't let him run again. I can't believe that that's a thing. But secondly, as soon as Elon Musk marched into the Department of Education and tried to keep everybody out, he would have been like slammed up against a wall and taken to a federal prison. Like,
Yeah.
just obviously, like, what
Yeah,
even?
I mean, even in countries like, say, Brazil, for example, which obviously had its flirtations with populism, most notably with Jair Bolsonaro, but then his supporters tried invading their government buildings, and they were all carted off to prison. There's footage of when the police, I think it's the military police, they go over to them and they think that they're being joined by them. Before you know it, they all start getting put in handcuffs. So it's pretty clear. Again, in South Korea, for example, when the South Korean president declared martial law and people rose up against him. I mean, it's probably not a good idea to declare martial law in a country where most of your citizens would have done national service, because it's a surefire way to end any attempted coup. But obviously, here in the States, I think a lot of it kind of relies on what are they like? Because
Yeah,
particularly with the media, for example, it's all a game to them. There's a reason that they haven't challenged Trump as hard as they could, because he makes their job interesting. There's journalists in America who owe their entire careers to Donald Trump, just reporting on every single thing that he does because there's a story to be made. SNL actors, these people owe their careers. For people who despise him, they really do owe their paychecks to him. And so that's why I feel that figures like that are never going to go away, because there's always going to be an angle for everyone to cover.
there's a market for it. I think that's the thing, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Yes, we should probably go on to our next story. Do you ever look at the world and wonder what the hell is going on? How did Trump get a second term? How can Freddo Frogs cost that much? And how did I end up agreeing with Tucker Carlson more than the person he was talking to? Like, that's never happened before. If you want to see where defending Israel gets you, this clip is particularly enlightening.
Case that we had to do it or whatever, but
I agree.
You should weep, and that's evil, and you should just say it's evil. And I know it's really threatening to
Is it evil?
Ben Shapiro to say that or whatever, but
Is it evil?
to kill civilians on purpose? Yeah, it is. I think it is.
Really?
Kids and children. Well, how is it not actually?
In a war?
We can call it whatever you want. How is it right to kill women and children?
I didn't say, because I think there is a moral right behind you if you are literally...
To kill women and children?
If
Really?
there's a world war that threatens if it threatens the entire world, yes.
Some people killed your kids, like your 8-year-old. Like,
Well, obviously,
how
it's your
is
own
that
children.
morally justifiable?
Well, because actually you have to... Well, by your criteria...
It's disgusting.
Okay, so no war is morally justified.
I mean, I think it's pretty hard to justify. I mean, yeah, I'm
Any
sure,
war.
A pure defensive action, sure. But all I'm saying, look, it's all ugly. It's all hard to stomach. I've actually seen some of it up close. It's super ugly. You're arguing against a construct that you created in order to argue against.
Not really.
I'm being super straightforward. If you're
Is there any form of warfare that's morally justified? Go on.
Let me finish. I'm saying when you intentionally kill women and children, when you wage war through fear by murdering the civilian population, I don't think that's a good thing. And I don't think you should be defending it. And I don't know why it's such a threat to say that out loud.
Now, we're not going to spend long on this one, as I think it's fairly self-explanatory. But Harry, how have we got to a state of affairs where Tucker Carlson sounds like the reasonable moderate in a conversation between him and Piers Morgan? What the
I know it's an interesting one, but then you find yourself in a room with Piers Morgan, you're instantly the most likable person there. Yeah, no, I mean it is quite weird that someone who main defense in court once was that people don't actually see his news show as just as entertainment. It's not actually supposed to be taken on a factual basis. It's quite interesting to see those arguments being made. But yeah, they're 100% right. I mean, how can you justify intentionally and even unintentionally murdering women and children? What threats do, and actually men as well. I think with the coverage with the genocide that's been going on in Palestine, a lot when we talk about the innocents, men are often excluded from that. And I don't know why. I'm sure there's a reason for it. But again, I mean, why? I mean, I think with Piers Morgan, he's tweaking for a state that would happily bomb him, if they thought that he posed a threat. And so it is kind of sad to see, but then it's also not surprising. I mean, when you hack dead girls' phones, nothing's beneath you.
Yeah, like in Just War Theory, there's like several elements like right intention, just cause, but two of the important ones are proportionality and discrimination. You've got to discriminate between combatants and civilians, and it always has to be proportionate. Your your attacks always have to be proportionate to the goals of minimizing civilian harm, minimizing attacks on civilians, and it seems to me that a lot of the Western world has just kind of forgotten what just war theory means, but also it's really hard to argue against Donald Trump invading Canada or Mexico or Panama or Greenland if you're living in a world where for the last 2 years the liberals, the people who are supposed to stand up for international law, have been going, well, international law doesn't really apply when you do it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. No. It's fine. Just
Yeah.
ignore international law. Don't worry about it. Like, because now, like, what China wants to take Taiwan. Well, international law doesn't really matter. Who's gonna stop me? Like,
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, what more can you say? And I think, yeah, definitely the last 18 months has really exposed the hypocrisy of the liberal world order, particularly regarding Israel's continuous onslaughts against the Palestinians, and also in Lebanon as well. It's been very much proven. I mean, we've seen cases where Netanyahu's plane has been flying over to the US, and it's flown over various European countries that have agreed to respect the ICC's arrest warrants, and yet they haven't summoned that plane down. So clearly, I mean, it doesn't really hold any. These things don't really hold any weight at all, and he's just going to be able to get away with it. The day that guy passes away, we'll be there. There'll be a world record broken with the number of people that simultaneously do a knee slide. But yeah, it will be a glorious
Oh,
day. Glorious day in the
yes.
world.
Yeah, I'm keen to see Netanyahu go. Like, God, uh, like, yeah, I think, yeah, the situation that the world has been put in by defending Netanyahu's pet genocide project in the West Bank and Gaza, and also his expansion into Syria, so often forgotten,
Yeah.
invasion of Lebanon, like, so many things that, and so many ways of talking that you would just never talk about like any other country.
Well, I
And
think because they've learned they can get away with it.
yeah,
You think back to when the Al Shifa hospital was bombed, and he was like, "Oh, we'd never bomb a hospital."
and
Six, 7 hospitals later, probably even more. They don't
yeah,
even bother like trying to defend it because
yeah,
essentially the Western world has gone. You know what? Mark your own homework, and
true.
obviously, when you mark your own homework, you're going to be more lenient with your marking. And especially when there's no one actually checking it for you, even when you can clearly see that it's wrong. When that one person holds that much power, you're not going to say no to them. And yeah,
It's that who's gonna fucking stop me principle,
yeah,
like it's how Donald Trump operates and it's how Netanyahu operates, because they are two sides of the same coin.
yeah,
And Joe Biden was so stupid not to see that. Like, he was so stupid not to just look at the way that Netanyahu acted and go, oh, this is somebody who's going to stab me in the back.
yeah.
This is somebody who's like going to like use me as far as I'm useful, and then go on to support like Donald Trump, which he did because he obviously liked Donald Trump more. It's just really obvious. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's just that it was an inconvenience to him to have someone like Biden there. But luckily, Biden was so senile, and AIPAC has got such a chokehold on American Congress people that it was very easy to get what they wanted.
yeah, it's just like gun reform. Like, the trying to get anything to do with gun reform passed is impossible because there's such bipartisan support, it seems, for Americans' freedom to bear
Yeah.
weapons to blow kids' brains
Again,
out. Like,
with private healthcare, when you have tens of thousands of people dying every year needlessly because they can't get access to healthcare through their insurance. But then when you have senators and various representatives in Congress who are basically in the pockets of the pharmaceutical companies and private healthcare corporations, nothing is ever going to change
yeah,
because their interests will speak louder than the American public.
yeah, whether it's like private healthcare, the NRA, or APAC, it's all the same shit. It's all
Mm.
that same thing of like the donors come first, the voters maybe
Was it
third or
was it
fourth.
APAC this last week that started calling out Kanye West for his blatant anti-Semitism, or was that
Did they?
ADL?
I'll be I will be very surprised the day that either of those organisations actually start opposing some fucking anti-Semitism. Jesus
Yeah, I know.
Christ!
That would be quite nice. It would be quite nice to see. Maybe once, just once.
Yes, as a treat on the
Yeah,
side,
I know.
they'll oppose some
Shock us.
actual anti-Semitism. Yeah,
Let's
shock
go.
us by
Whoa.
actually opposing
Wow.
some anti-Semitism.
Wow. Sorry, it's not
Um,
a college student wearing a kafaya. Fucking hell. Yeah, this is interesting.
Yeah. So somebody did a Nazi salute on stage, and you
He
didn't
was just
defend them in
stimming. What are you
front
on
of
about?
someone.
He was
Yeah.
just stimming.
Oh
You
yeah,
know, he was
just
just really
stimming.
excited.
Yeah, autistic stimming, obviously. Oh my god. Yeah.
Oh, the ADL.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
Sorry,
apparently it
different
was the
organisation.
ADL. Thank you, Rachel, in the comments. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
So yes, as we were then, I think we should probably go on to our next story. I didn't want to spend too long on that one. So the Stapleton Workhouse was one of many workhouses created as part of the Victorian Poor Laws. Excuse me, I'll just start that section again just in case we didn't. So the Stapleton Workhouse was one of many workhouses created as part of the Victorian Poor Laws, which sought to punish poor people for the moral failing of being poor. Recently, a series of 4,500 unmarked graves were discovered at the site, bringing up the memories of just how cruel society can be to the poor, the out of work, and the most vulnerable. Earlier this week, I spoke to Mike Jempson, the journalist who broke that story about the workhouses and how they relate to today's politics. Please be aware that the video is slightly sped up just to make sure that it fits within within the time slot of the show. Cool. So I am being joined at the moment by journalist and contributor to West England Bylines, Mike Jempson. Mike is, a journalist who focuses on social history, and his latest book is No Cure, No Fee, Boarding Accepted, Mason's Madhouses in Old Fish Ponds. And Mike, there was an article of yours which caught my eye that I wanted to talk to you about because I think that it's so linked to parts of history that are often sort of quietly forgotten. And that was your article about the Bristol Stapleton Workhouse, where the graves of 4,500 people who died at the workhouse were uncovered. So first of all, I just want to ask you what we know about this grave, what we know about these sets of these people.
Well, I first heard about it when they were converting what had been a prison and then a workhouse into luxury flats and new houses. And some of the guys working there tipped me the wink that they'd found a load of bodies in the ground, but they were all sworn to secrecy. And I tried to persuade them to let me come and have a look. But that was a few years ago, and it was more than their job's worth, if you see what I mean. What's extraordinary is this is the second time this has happened locally, because just down the road, at 100 Fish Ponds Road, which was the largest workhouse certainly in the south of England, local residents a few years ago discovered that something like 4,000 people had been buried in unmarked graves on a piece of land which would eventually be turned into a play area for children. And they did this extraordinary project where they identified all the people who'd been buried there. It's one of the most remarkable community projects I've ever been involved in. And they produced a book about what they'd found and arranged to have a memorial put there and raise money for a playground for local children to sort of remember, especially the little babies that were buried, as they say, under the wall. So these were sort of unidentified, perhaps, or certainly unbaptized children who died in the workhouse. And then just up the road here in Stapleton, or Upper Fish Ponds, we find it's happened again.
There was a real range of people, range of ages, as you mentioned, but also a range of skills. You go out of your way in the article to mention the sort of skill range of people who were in the workhouse. Why did you go out of your way to highlight that? Like, how does that link to the sort of story of the workhouse and what the workhouse was there to do?
Well, I mean, complicated in some ways, but I just happened to come across the census details for that particular workhouse, and a variety of things struck me. One of them was the range of people who were there geographically, but also the fact that many of them had skills which should have been worth a living, if you see what I mean. So there were mines in the area. There was also a big boot and shoe industry in nearby Kingswood, in particular, and ironically, the madhouse I was writing about became a boot and shoe factory after it had closed down.
how much of that would you tie back to today and the way that we treat people who are on welfare today? Do you think there are some legitimate comparisons? I've seen one that I'll go into in a moment, but I want to get your kind of thoughts on that idea first. And is that kind of where your interest in this came from?
Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, I think this idea of a sort of moral weakness stretched back long before the Victorian times. And there was always a problem about what do you do with people who can't look after themselves? And there were, good Christian people who felt that they had a moral duty to look after them, and others who felt that there was a bit of a problem because these people were a drain on the public purse, as it were. So it was interesting that when people were consigned to the workhouse, or indeed volunteered, because people could knock on the door and ask to be taken in, they were usually identified by the parishes they came from. So it's quite interesting that the geography of these things linked to the church parishes they came from, because those parishes, if necessary, might have to contribute, if not fully pay, for any expenses that were incurred. And one of the things we found at the Eastville workhouse was that the people buried in unmarked graves were the people who were not claimed by family or by parishes, because the parishes were responsible for taking them away and burying them. As for linking that to today, well, we don't have the workhouses now, thank goodness. But you do find that the right-wing papers in particular, and certainly members of the Tory party still have this sort of attitude that if you fall on hard times, it's your fault. There's nothing sort of structural about the circumstances that lead people to be short of funds or unable for one reason or another to look after themselves. And I think it's very interesting that the interpretations that are being put on the vast number of people who are what they call now not economically active. Now, a lot of those people are not well, and it's fascinating and frightening to me to hear the Labour Party saying, well, we're going to sort of dig into the welfare benefits and cut them right back because we need people to be working. If you look at the stats for disability, for instance, it appears that there is no fraud whatsoever there. And one of the problems is this gets amplified, particularly through the media, it seems to me. The media, I don't mean the media leading, but sort of taking a lead from the politicians who find these, what's the right word, shrill messages, that then encourages people to think, oh, well, that is a problem that is nothing to do with us that we need to deal with. And that just stigmatizes people who are on the receiving end of benefits. And it is very easy as a journalist, I can tell you, it's very easy to find people who are cheating the system. And they're the ones who make the headlines. And you can see this over and over again, particularly, for instance, at the moment, over asylum seekers and the way that they somehow are to blame for their circumstances, when in fact the system is not coping at all. I have refugees staying in my house and have done for about 20 years. And most of them are utterly phased and depressed by the fact that they would happily work, they would happily do things, they would happily contribute to society, but they're not allowed to. And they then get the blame for the circumstances that they're in. And they are made the scapegoats. And you could say that the modern day workhouse are these so-called luxury hotels into which and maybe Stockholm, etc., into which they are consigned.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought up the Labour Party in this, actually, and they're playing into the idea that the problem is people on benefits and the welfare system, the welfare budget is too large. Because actually, I want to draw the comparison. So the 1834 Poor Laws that came about, which created a lot of the Dickensian, the famous kind of workhouse systems. They prior to that, there was a burgeoning welfare bill. Invariably, the problem that people had with it, or the problem that they said they had with it, the phrase that kept coming up in reports, is that on the streets, able-bodied people were being given welfare support outside of workhouses, and this was unacceptable to people. And it does remind me of the rhetoric and the way that people talk about the long-term unemployed, particularly young people who are long-term unemployed, and it kind of ties back to that idea of it's an individual moral failing rather than a failing with the system. Because I remember Suella Braverman talking about homelessness, saying it was a lifestyle choice. And I think one of the best responses that I saw to that was somebody going, "Isn't it weird that more and more people, as austerity baked in, more and more people chose this lifestyle choice suddenly, isn't it a weird coincidence that when the Tories are in and cutting welfare and pushing people into poverty, making cuts to state spending, weirdly, more and more people are choosing that lifestyle. But that is not the fault of the people who are in that system. That is a systemic failure, not an individual moral failure. And I think, would you put that forward as a lesson people can learn from this, or am I extrapolating too much from that?
No, I mean, I think in some ways that was the point that I was making. I mean, I think that it's difficult, isn't it? Because I think it was back in the 16th century that the first workhouses, effectively workhouses, were created for young people. Here in Bristol, certainly, the first workhouse was for young girls. I think for 100 young girls.
Wow.
To protect them from penury and the risks that were attendant on somebody who was without family, without friends, or whatever.
I did want to just touch on the level of cruelty that we see from the workhouses, because the point of the workhouses was, if we are cruel to the people on welfare, if we're cruel to the people who use these for their survival, if we make it worse for them being on welfare than being employed, then ultimately people will want to go into employment, right? That was the theory. But when it came to the people's mistreatment in workhouses, what sort of thing did we see in these in the workhouses that we were talking about, just to show us what we're trying to avoid going towards or going back to, either in the case of asylum seekers or people on welfare, people who need support on welfare? What sort of
Well, the idea, a bit like some of the ideas around prisoners, was that people should, in one way or another, help to pay for their keep, but also to make the point, as you were saying, that being in the workhouse was not the best way to live your life. They were given often very demeaning jobs, which might be crushing stones or picking oakum, which meant sort of unpicking thick ropes. And that's one of the sort of classic jobs that people did. And what really intrigued me, and I've written about this too, is that they had punishment. There was a punishment regime in the workshops and in the workhouses. And people got all sorts of strange punishments for all sorts of strange things. One of them being sort of answering back, or being impious or unpolite. It would seem that some of the older men seem to be into masturbation, which also won them punishments, which might be being locked up in solitary confinement. And the younger children would get more punitive, more physical punishments for sort of running away or scrumping apples from local farmers, etc. So there was a sort of regime that kept people in their place. My understanding is that if people could, they would get out of there as quickly as they could. But they also had to, as it were, the institution themselves had to pay their way. So lots of the decisions, it would seem from the research that we've done, that were made by the Board of Guardians were to reduce costs. And that's, again, exactly the same sort of attitude that we're getting from Madame Reeves and co. at the moment from the current Labour government. That, I think it shook everybody to their core that one of the first things that they did was to reduce or remove the winter heating allowance from elderly people.
So I just want to ask, before you go, where can people find you? Where can people find your work?
I've got a website where I put all sorts of stuff, including Labour and local history and various other bits and pieces, which is www.mikejempson.eu. That's easy enough to find, hopefully. My book about the madhouse is available from Bristol Radical History Group, which has a website, and there are some fascinating publications that are available there. In fact, one of my colleagues in the group have just written an interesting pamphlet that will come out shortly about the prisoner of war camp that was there prior to the buildings becoming the workhouse. It's called Les Miserables of Bristol, and it's about the people in those. Some fascinating stuff that he's found. So that'll be available from the Radical History Group as well.
Excellent, absolutely excellent. Thank you so much for your time, Mike. You have been fantastic. Cool. So Harry, do you ever think about how our social attitudes to the poor haven't really changed that much since the Dickensian era? Because I think about this quite a bit, to be honest.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I think it just gets rehashed, and it's sort of presented as a sort of respectable bigotry. There's always got to be some sort of justification for it. We've seen it successively. It's why whenever you hear Labour politicians at the moment saying they're making really difficult decisions and they always revolve around, say, welfare. And it's like, yes, because famously it's always been very difficult for a government to take away money from the most vulnerable in our society, as we've seen. I did find it interesting how the chap who just spoke brought up the idea of sort of like asylum seeker accommodation and sort of the exploitation that we're seeing there. One of the ways that we have seen it is through sort of the gig economy, to do with sort of like Uber Eats and Deliveroo apps like that basically prey on undocumented people, because then they are not subject to the same rights and same terms and conditions that, say, someone who is a recognised worker in this country would be able to receive. So yeah, it's definitely it's not got worse. I'd just say we talk about it more. Well, I suppose
Yeah.
it's got worse as well.
Yes, there was a meme that went round for a while. It was I think it was either a copy of Hard Times or Oliver Twist, that somebody had like taken and put on Facebook, and they'd just taken the title off, and they'd replaced the words with "just fucking vote Labour," which was a great meme a few years ago. But now it's like, no,
Yeah.
actually, if you vote Labour,
Well, this
you're
is
getting the
this is the thing is, like, you know, throughout the election, I remember beforehand being told, "Oh, vote Labour to get the Tories out," and it's like, am I? Am I really? Because I've got their manifesto in my hand. They sent it to me. I left the Labour Party. I'm still on the mailing list, and I've had a gander, and I'm not really seeing anything different apart from a few modest tax rises that are probably going to get U-turned on because of the slightest bit of pressure, like with non-dom status, for example. That's potentially going to be U-turned on because of concerns that the non-dom community have, i.e. We're not going to be able to get away with not paying taxes. You know, it's just it boils my piss. It proper boils my piss because, like,
well,
what am I what am I actually going to be voting for? And you know, it's not that good.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because funnily enough, we need to go on to our fourth and final story, and lo and behold, it is how awful the Labour Party are. As the final story, like, unironically, that is what we are now going on to. Cool. So you might remember a few days ago that the Labour Party saw fit to publish this reform adjacent poster using that lovely reform blue to show how tough they were being on immigration. You see, we're just like them, and they're right about everything to do with immigration, but please vote for us instead. What a brilliant strategy. Flawless. Thanks, Labour. Absolutely fantastic. Well, this week, Labour doubled down on that position and started publishing videos of immigration raids to show how tough they were, and how tough they were being on random non-white people in terraced housing who don't look like they're at the top of society and living it large, shall we say.
You're under arrest on suspicion of arranging and facilitating the illegal immigration into the United Kingdom.
Wow, you really showed that old grandad in his terraced house what for. He really, really, took it to him. Well done, Labour. Okay, according to the Times, from Monday, the government will release videos of illegal immigrants being detained and deported to convince voters that it's taking action. It comes as voters say Labour's boast of 16,000 deportations is not true because it hasn't appeared in the news. The low information voter is really causing problems for us here, but the Labour Party are causing even more problems because, in addition to this, Labour has shelved its manifesto pledge to make it easier for people to legally change their gender in a bid to counter Reform UK's surge in the polls. Shelved its manifesto pledge. That's a funny way of saying that they lied through their fucking teeth to the LGBT community. Does that work in marriages too? Look, I know I said vows of marriage, but I'm shelving those vows so that me and Steve can go to Las Vegas together. That's how pledges work, right? What? What? The way that this is being spoken about is like shelving your pledges. They lied. They just lied. Like, they've gone back on their pledges. At being as generous as you can, they have gone back on their pledges. If we're being honest about it, they lied. They had no intention of keeping those pledges. Did they learn nothing from watching the Democrats as well? It's not just a matter of like morality here. If you let the right wing control the narratives and just copy them every time, you're going to lose, because no right winger who thinks immigrants are invading the country is going to vote Reform Light when the full fat version of Reform is sat there smoking a cigar. It's not even as like it's even got as bad as deja vu when I remembered that Kamala Harris was saying that she wouldn't have done anything different to Biden, and I stumbled on this post from 2 months ago. Keir Starmer says there is nothing that he would have done differently as PM over the last 5 months with the benefit of hindsight. Literally the same stuff that Kamala Harris was saying. I wouldn't have done anything differently with the way I've governed. With the way that we've governed, of course, in the case of Kamala Harris. Harry, my question is very simple. Are Labour actually trying to lose the next election? Like, do they actually want Farage to win?
Labour are behaving the way that I sometimes behave when I'm about maybe 10, 11 seasons deep in a Football Manager save, where basically what I do is I just start like putting players in different positions. I start trying out custom tactics that I know probably aren't going to work, but I'm bored. And for them, I think basically they got what they wanted, right? They got their moment on the 4th of July, 2024. You know, they all won their seats. They got the ministerial cars. They got the nice houses. They got all the benefits. And then it was like, what do we do now? Oh, wait. Oh, well, let's just take a look at our manifesto. Oh, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. 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 And you're not going to do that. Right. 5 years is going to be great, isn't it? And this is the thing. This is what they're doing. I mean, they seem to be, again, looking at what Reform UK is doing, and it's like the reason people are looking to Reform UK is because there's serious economic hardship in this country, and people are angry because the government isn't doing anything about it. So, you know, going after immigrants, I mean, that's just classic. I mean, that's probably the easiest trick in the book. But you know, you could kick out every single immigrant and their firstborn, and bills would still be high, rent would still be extortionate. You know, nothing would improve in this country as a result of it. You know, perhaps you may feel a little bit better. That might warm your heart, but you know, your house is still going to be cold because you can't afford the heating. And you know, kicking out a bunch of refugees is not going to change that. Again, I think they seem to think, like you've kind of said, you know, very famously, it's very threatening seeing people coming marching towards you with their placards that literally read, "We agree with you." Right, you know, this is what they're doing. And what's going to happen is in 5 years' time, when we're on the cups of having a hard right Tory Reform UK coalition government, Labour, Labour and their supporters are going to turn around to us and say, vote for us to stop, you know, a hard right government. And it's like, well, we've already got one.
You said Reform.
Why would I, you know, what would be the difference? What are you going to do differently this time? And then there's a load of promises. The stuff regarding trans rights. I mean, if you look at the polling, the public is very much in support of self-ID. When it comes to like legally changing your gender, there is like a few percentage points difference, but by and large, the public is very much in favor of it. This is polling from about 2 years ago, so maybe it is different now. When you look at, say, at least half of Britons, according to the YouGov polling I looked at today, said that they recognise transphobia as being a big problem in this country. But what's most important is that 2/3 of Britons have paid little to no attention to the whole trans rights debate, because it's almost like there are bigger issues going on at the moment. And, you know, I think the fact that Labour is shelving these plans, you're right, Cog, they had no intention of actually making it easier for people to change their gender. But I think it's really insulting to people that they think are going to vote Reform, like that they actually really this is an issue that really grinds them. for some of them, maybe that will be the case. But actually, when you look at the real big issues in this country, self ID is not on there. It doesn't even register, not even in. Because it's almost like it's just something that the Westminster media bubble focus on, an unhealthy amount, and they just need to get a life because they're weird. It's just weird.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
the run.
obsessive.
Yeah.
It is. Like, but on the other hand, Harry, like, Keir Starmer has 5 missions or 5 pledges, 5 what was 5 steps, 5 first steps, 5 5 pillars, 5 5 potholes.
I think he's lost about 5. I mean, he's probably lost all 5 of them. He's going to start again. He'll have a rebrand. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just get over Keir.
Every other week.
I know.
Every other week they
This
have a
is why
rebrand.
I got booed in my comments saying that I thought Keir Starmer was going to be gone as Prime Minister by the end of this year. But you know, I'm sticking with my guns, and I look forward to everyone's apologies come December. You know, but I think this is the thing. I mean, you know, no one these things that they're focusing on, they're not actually going to improve things. I mean, the fact that Reform UK is to the left of Labour when it comes to water nationalisation should tell you everything about this party. That they really do not have a clue. There is no clear vision, and hopefully that changes. Because I don't like the idea of come 2029 us potentially having a hard right Tory Reform UK coalition government. But I mean, this Labour government at the moment, you know, I'm sure they're not going to be as bad as potentially what is going to come, but they're not. You know, there's no enthusiasm, and this was the thing. I've said this consistently. There was no real enthusiasm for this government. So really, they kind of had they. You could say they had nothing to lose, but clearly they're trying to put that to the test because clearly there is a lot to lose, their seats. And you would hope that these people who are incredibly motivated by self-interest would recognise that they want to keep those privileges that they've fought very hard for their entire lives to get.
It's just self-preservation after a point, right? It's just like you understand that the people who follow you are that they are extremists. Like if you don't fight back against this, and that was the other thing I was going to say actually. If the polling since that poll in 2018 or whenever it was taken has changed, if the polling has changed, I would say that only solidifies the argument that you have to actually argue for your positions. You can't do this thing where you just like, oh, so most people are against trans rights. Well, I'll just be against trans rights too. You actually have to like force a position. The right
Yeah,
wing
you look at the
understand
various
this.
social and civil rights movements throughout history. There was always opposition, and there was very strong opposition. And this is just the next one. And you know, in 40, 50 years' time, we'll probably look back on in disgust at how our politicians spoke about 0.5% of the population, but because it was a good way of getting themselves out there, that's what they did. It is insane to me, but then it's also not insane to me because, you know, this is what Labour is now. This is why I have no qualms about not voting for them last year. I have no qualms about never voting for them again, as long as they continue stunts like this. And you know, I again with the WhatsApp messages that that got revealed last weekend, I saw some quote tweets saying, you know, well done, Andrew, you're distracting from all the good things that Labour are doing. Could we hear some of those, please? And
yeah.
the only thing I could really name is pissing off Jeremy Clarkson, but that's one guy, and you know, that's literally it. That's probably the only thing I can think of.
Yes.
So yeah, I know.
It's also remarkable just how Trumpian this is. Like, this isn't even like the Conservatives did do a little bit of this sort of thing, but publishing a video, what was it, every day or every week they're going to be publishing a video about.
Yeah, but I mean, people forget like the Tory party. They literally during the election campaign, they posted an attack ad of people laying out red carpet on the beaches of Dover, saying that, you know, Labour was going to allow all these people to come in. And Labour were clearly like, well, you know, no, we're not. And these deportation rates, if they're going to do these videos throughout, they need to change it up. So actually include the screaming, the shouting, the separation of parents from their children that's going to be happening, the raids that are happening on business places of work. They should be showing the employers who are exploiting those people. Because you know, we shouldn't be using those businesses, and we deserve to know. You know, it's all well and good, you know, having it's basically, you know, it's the 3-minute hate, right? It's the you know, the hate that's been directed towards these incredibly vulnerable people, but actually show the exploiters as well. Show the employers. We deserve to know who these people are. And if they don't, I mean, well, that tells you everything you need to know.
100%. Yeah, it's so Trumpian and so classic scapegoaty. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
100%.
scapegoating. But we should probably move on to our comments section. So we are going to react to some of your comments before we finish. Firstly, though, I want to remind you that we are all still volunteers here at Turn Left and doing our best to produce content around our paid work. If we want to become a fully fledged media organisation, we need your help. Please like and share our content and help us out financially by going to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support, where you can make a one-off donation or give us a small donation each month to keep us going. We are now also on Blue Sky, the fast-growing social media alternative to Twitter. I actually think that Blue Sky is going to be very important in the future because it will be one of the few networks that isn't just solely owned by a billionaire. That's going to be quite important. So do go and check out our work on there. Let's have a look at these comments then, and our producer will be joining us for this section. How you doing, Cal?
I'm not so bad, thank you. How are you?
Awesome.
Good show as always. Yeah, it's some really interesting comments today, actually. I just wanted to start with Zeke DeBeast, who's just commented, "It's nice to hear you both speak humanely on immigrants and trans community and people who are struggling and want to work." I think, firstly, I'm sure, Cog and Harry are grateful for that comment, but I think it speaks of a really sad state of affairs when Zeke even needs to say it's nice to hear somebody speaking humanely about human beings, because I think it highlights the many problems that we have right now with the rhetoric that we're seeing, both from the far right, also from the Labour government. We've just had 14 years of it with the Conservatives, and the fact that it's the fact that we need to even say it's nice to hear people speaking humanely. Just to me, it just reminds us of how many people are not doing so.
Yeah,
That's very
that bare
sweet.
minimum and not even clearing it. Sorry, Harry, go on.
No, I was just saying it was very sweet to hear, and thank you, Zeke. It's very kind.
Thanks, Zeke.
Before we look at some others, I'd just like to congratulate James Holmes celebrating 13 months of membership as well.
Wow.
Thank you for your support, James. We always appreciate that.
Stuff.
Yeah, we've got quite a lot, so it's picking out the good ones. They're all good ones. So
I'm sure.
Jonathan Laycock, Starmer would rather have far-right government than implement socialist policy as he did in 2019. I was talking about this today, actually, about how Starmer stood on a platform to continue Corbyn's socialist policies. I was in the room with him at the first hustings for the leadership debate. It was like a debate for the. I'll start that again. It was the leadership hustings debate for the leader of the Labour Party after Corbyn had resigned. It was the first one in Liverpool. I was a member of the party at the time, and he stood on the platform. And somebody had asked about, what would you do in terms of keep, which policies would you keep, which would you change, etc. And Starmer stood there and was categorically confident in his rhetoric that Corbyn had been great for the party and that we needed to keep those policies. The Labour Party under Corbyn got loads more people involved with politics. It really sort of rallied people behind the party. People were interested in socialist politics, and if you voted for him to be leader, he would continue with those. And then he got in, and look what happened.
Yeah, it was nice whilst it lasted.
Yeah.
I make very little secret about the fact, and I've spoken to Harry about it quite a bit, that I voted for Keir Starmer in the Labour leadership elections.
I didn't. I voted for Rebecca Long Bailey. Just throwing that one out there.
Well,
you can't blame me.
Yeah, well, okay, Cal, you were right. I do have to say, I think it would be. I can't say anything but you were right in that situation. But I've told so many of my friends who voted for RLB that they were right. I should have voted for RLB, but I I'd had so many years of somebody trustworthy being at the top of the party that I forgot how often politicians just lie straight to your face. And so I was like, nah, he can't just be lying about that. He's keen on these ideas. He's just Corbyn, it's like Corbyn but with a lawyer and suit, and
Yeah.
so we can make this
I mean, I
work.
remember trying to justify a lot of the tweaks and basically U-turns, and the whole idea was, well, the political landscape is changing, but if anything, it was actually changing in a way that would make those ideas more viable and more appealing. When oil and gas giants are taking the piss out of everybody, when there's piss and shit in the rivers, then nationalisation seems like a great idea, because let's increase accountability and get these issues sorted. But yeah, I mean, when they're receiving donations and gifts from these various organisations,
It does concern me, though, that we're now seeing this shift to essentially reform policies, and in some case even reform propaganda, with the example of the attack ad that you saw, that Cog shared earlier on. This idea that in order to get more votes they need to be more like reform is just complete and utter nonsense. Like you said before, Cog, why would they vote for Reform Light when they can have the fully fleshed thing? And I think what Labour need to pay attention to is the numbers on the election night, and see that actually when the Labour Party ran in an election on socialist policies, more people up and down the country supported it than what have supported Starmer and the party in the shape that it is now. And we saw that on election night. And we know that on numbers, Corbyn's party was more popular. It was just that the Conservatives were doing better at the time. Starmer wouldn't be in power if the Conservative Party hadn't crumbled. But it does concern me that he's sort of moving towards, well, let's push the anti-immigration rhetoric, let's push the anti-trans rhetoric. And I mean that step back on the policy for making it easier for people to be able to change their gender on
well, it's just Starmer taking his turn of cranking the racism dial.
Exactly. I mean,
looking at all of us to make sure that
Yeah.
keeps looking at all of us to make sure that it's he's allowed to go as far as he's going. The
Natlis
problem is
commented
that,
and said, "This is why I've been waiting like 4 months for my gender recognition certificate." Which it's just insane that they said that they would make it easier, and all of a sudden, and it does seem all of a sudden. I mean, we know that Wes Streeting's hardly been pro-trans throughout his time in the health brief, but this has come at a time when we've seen Donald Trump directly go on the attack of trans people. I mean, it's essentially government policy now in the US that trans people don't even exist. We've seen members of the trans community essentially having passports and documentation taken off of them. Many of them are essentially in the state of a travel ban because they're not able to get the documents back until the passport offices work out what the hell they're doing about changing the gender markers. Add to that the removal of trans women being allowed to take part in women's sports. The whole thing's just falling apart. But because Reform are saying, well, we want to be more like Trump, and they're going after DEI and all that sort of stuff, it's like Labour have just gone, oh shit, well, if Trump's doing it, Reform are going to do it. So if we do it now, then people will vote for us instead.
Well,
of
it's
not going to work.
It's because he's seen as getting shit done. And that's what people like to see their politicians do. They like to see them getting stuff done. Say what you like about Trump. There's a lot of things that we can say about him, but he is seen to be doing something. And that's what people like to see. They're fed up of politicians that are just sitting on their hands. And the problem is this is a politician that won't sit on his hands and is, just signing any old thing. But because he's seen to be doing something, that's what people like. And that's what people want to see happen in this country. Unfortunately, we don't have stuff like executive orders and stuff like that. We have checks and balances. But again, people want to. That's why you see Rupert Lowe putting a tweet out every half the day about some sort of weird thing that he's got an issue with, like a Bengali in Whitechapel Station, for example.
Doesn't he?
It's just like, just give over, mate. Just give over. But people like to see their politicians be seen to be doing something.
Excuse me. On Trump, Edward Sexby said, "Will Musk be a king or God emperor? What a sad little dweeb he is.
He's
The
more like
power
the
that
eunuch advisor.
the power that Trump has given this man is insane, though, right?
It is, but I would say he's more like I don't know, at the moment he feels like the eunuch advisor. He feels like cream or worm tongue.
Yes, I
I
can see
would
that.
say. Not Varys. He's not cool enough to be Varys.
No.
But I would definitely say that's how he feels to me at the moment. But, you know, the thing is with the eunuch advisor, they do have a lot of ambition. And with someone like Elon Musk, his ambition knows no bounds. And even if it's not him, I'm sure he'll take credit for it, as he always has done throughout his entire career.
Just on this, and this plays into and something. Just by the way, I'm just to blow your trumpet for a moment, Cog. Something that you do really well in the way that you present these sometimes quite difficult and quite horrific news stories is that you always find a way to add an element of humor to it, and I think that's needed in such dark times, and that seems to have rubbed off in the chat today. We've got two comments that I'd like to just draw attention to.
Okay.
So we've got this one from Natalie, which is, why do the two competing god kings both have last names for a bad smell? One is a strong odour and the other a wet fart.
That is so. That's true.
Followed
God.
up with this from Les. My sweetheart used to wear a musk perfume that drove me wild. That memory is ruined. One more reason to hate musk, you memory spoiler. It's true though. How is it we've got two of them both with, you know, last names representing something smelly?
Miasma.
Yeah, that is so weird.
I mean, I'm not religious.
never thought about
You know,
that.
is it
I
like
never thought
the
about
universe playing tricks on us or something, trying to send a message?
There was a thing for a while, of course. Everyone knows this. I'm just rehashing old stuff, but like there was a thing for a while of like people in the US were like, your leader's name is Boris Johnson. Johnson is like another word for a dick here. Like, that's so weird. And we were like, hang on, your leader's name is Donald Trump. Trump is a word for a fart here.
Yeah.
Like, there's always been that kind of But not the most highbrow conversation we've ever had. But like, we move.
No, but an important one all the same.
Yes,
I'm coming back to more serious things. I've just seen Jonathan mention this one. When will Starmer get the message that if he doesn't improve the material conditions of working class people by the time of the next election, Labour will be toast?
100%. But I think it's also not just working class people as well. It's the middle classes as well who are really who are also starting to feel the pinch too. Inevitably, when everyone's fucked off, there is going to be there will be a reckoning, and it's not going to look good. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if we see riots in the next year or so, like we saw in Southport and other cities as well. Maybe for different reasons, but again, there is going to be that anger is still there, and it's not going to go away. So yeah, I mean, Labour will be toast. I mean, part of me kind of wants to see that, but at the same time, I don't want to see that because I know what's going to follow it.
Yeah, I feel the same. Actually, there's a part of me. It was like when Joe Biden. I think it was in the final year of Joe Biden's presidency. I tweeted out something innocuously, thinking that Joe Biden was going to win, and I was like, Joe Biden is going to win the next election, but in relation to what he's doing to Gaza, he deserves to fucking lose, man. He just deserves to lose, and I hate that. In some ways, I hate that he's going to win. But I actually hate this more. I definitely hate this more. Like this is worse.
Yeah.
And it's odd, isn't it, that we've come to a situation where you were agreeing with Tucker Carlson as well. Andy says, "Wow, Carlson has been the stopped clock today."
Yeah,
I thought that was really interesting from Piers Morgan to like. I get that he's got some horrendous takes, but to try and justify and defend the slaughter of civilians. Like, I don't know why, but maybe I'm naive and I shouldn't think anything else from him. But I don't know why it shocked me to hear Piers Morgan sort of making excuses for that. I thought he was maybe a tiny bit better than that, but I'm probably giving him too much credit.
That's the thing with Piers Morgan, isn't it? You know, when you think you know low, he'll find lower. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add on Piers Morgan. Like, what a piece of shit.
Moral
Like,
conscience, maybe.
yeah, that would be a nice thing to add to him.
Rachel said, Ari, why men aren't being included among the innocents? Israel and many other security states conveniently list all males 18 plus as potential enemy combatants, regardless of their actual status.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, which I thought was interesting if that is the case, because you know, and we see it at that sort of level in terms of counting, you know, civilian dead and who's innocent and who's not. But I mean, this idea, it trickles down all the way to the conversation about refugees and asylum seekers as well, doesn't it? This term, you know, fighting age men, that seems to have entered the public discourse recently.
Yeah.
And it's scary how, you know, we can just sort of we can excuse you know, the slaughter or mistreatment of men of a certain age, because they could be soldiers, they could be terrorists, they could be all these evil, horrible things.
There's always a could be, and the thing is, when you know, massacre them, it's particularly in the case of Israel-Palestine. If you massacre a Palestinian man potentially in front of his family, or wipe out a couple generations of his family, there will be some of his family potentially left who will want to take revenge, and it's just going to be a never-ending cycle. So yeah, it's not a surprise when you see news reports that Hamas have been able to recruit more people, because it's almost like when you've had 15 months or nearly 18 months, I suppose, of a consistent bombardment, you know, people are going to, you know, they're going to want to take action.
Yeah, 100%. Cog, do you have anything to add on that one?
I was just going to say that it's often a theme in genocide as well. It's often a way the genocide is sort of moved forward. Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia, is a great example of that, where often it was the men of the men of the village who would be taken first, and taken away and executed first, because the justification was, these men are partisans, and it's often just an excuse to push the genocide. You make the group of acceptable acceptable casualties larger and larger. I say casualties as though they're accidentally being guilty. The group that it's seen as acceptable to exterminate larger and larger, and that's how a lot of genocides kind of function, sadly. But yeah, it's just a side point.
Yeah, there are more, there always is, but looking at time, I think we should probably wrap up there with the comments. I think.
Yep.
But thanks to everyone as always for commenting, and keep them coming. And if you're able to as well, when we're done tonight, if you pop back onto the replay and just pop some of your comments in there as well, it just helps the algorithm, and helps push the episode out to people that couldn't join us while we were on air. So yeah, thanks again for all your support. Though I'll go back into the background.
Thank you, Calum. Yes, we really appreciate your support. Thank you, Harry, for coming on and joining me.
No, anytime. Thank you for having me on.
You've been really, really good as ever. You know you're brilliant, and I love talking to you. It's always great. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. We have a show on Thursday evening, so please do tune in for that. Please do give us a follow on Blue Sky, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. We're on Twitch now as well. We are on Kick, weirdly. I don't know exactly what we're going to do on there. And we have a Facebook page, so do go and check out those ones particularly, because we've got barely any following on any of those. You can just search as usual for Turn Left Media. We will be a fully fledged media organisation one day. Please mark my words. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Good night.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.